The camera flashes were like a volley of tiny, merciless explosions, each one searing Isabella's worn-out dress into the public memory. Whispers slithered through the velvet ropes, sharp and venomous, dissecting her swollen belly, her simple shoes, her very presence at the Innovators of Tomorrow gala. They called her a charity case, a gold digger who'd trapped the promising artist, Leo Rossi. Beside her, Leo's hand tightened on hers, his knuckles white with helpless rage. But Isabella just held her head high, a silent prayer on her lips. Long before the flash bulbs and the whispers, there was just a small, cluttered apartment that smelled perpetually of turpentine and love. This was Isabella and Leo's sanctuary, a world away from the gilded cage of high society. Their life was a tapestry woven with threads of struggle and threads of profound joy. Leo was an artist in the truest sense of the word. His canvases were explosions of color and emotion, but they rarely translated into the currency that paid for rent or groceries. His hands, perpetually stained with cerulean blue and cadmium yellow, were the same hands that would gently trace the curve of Isabella's growing belly, his touch a silent promise of a future he was desperately trying to build. Isabella had met him on a rainy Tuesday in a dusty, forgotten corner of the city library. She was reading a book of poetry. He was sketching the way the light fell through the tall, arched windows. He'd looked up, his gaze locking with hers, and in that single suspended moment, a universe had been born between them. He saw not just a pretty woman, but a soul with a quiet depth, a strength that resided in the gentle curve of her smile. She saw a man whose passion burned so brightly it threatened to consume him, yet whose eyes held a vulnerability that called to her own. Their courtship was a whirlwind of shared dreams whispered over cheap coffee, of long walks through city parks where they planned a future that felt both impossibly distant and wonderfully certain. He never asked about her past, and she never offered. Her history was a locked room, the key long since thrown away. She had arrived in the city years ago with nothing but a small suitcase and a heart heavy with the ghosts of a lonely childhood. She had built a life for herself, brick by humble brick, working as a freelance translator, her fluency in 4 languages, a skill that kept them afloat during the leanest of months. To Leo, she was simply Isabella, the woman who could calm the storms in his artistic soul with a single touch, whose belief in him was the bedrock on which he stood. He knew nothing of the world she had fled, a world of silent, cavernous mansions and expectations as heavy as ancestral armor. He didn't know that her simple, unassuming nature was a carefully constructed fortress to protect a secret she believed would shatter the beautiful, fragile reality they had built. The invitation to the Innovators of Tomorrow gala had arrived like a golden ticket to a world they didn't belong in. One of Leo's sculptures, a breathtaking piece of twisted metal and reclaimed wood that spoke of nature's resilience, had caught the eye of a prominent critic. Suddenly, Leo Rossi was the name on everyone's lips, the dark horse, the raw talent the art world had been waiting for. The gala was his grand entrance, his coronation. For Isabella, it was a summons to the very world she had run from. She had tried to refuse. "Leo, I don't feel well. It's the baby," she'd murmured, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. He had knelt before her, his hands covering hers. "I can't do this without you, Isa. You're my anchor. When I stand in that room, full of people who see my work as a commodity, I need to look across the crowd and see you, my true north." How could she deny him? So she had agreed, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. The problem of a dress was immediate. They had no money for designer gowns. Isabella spent a week scouring thrift stores and consignment shops, finally finding a simple dark blue velvet dress. It was far from haute couture, but with a few careful alterations, it draped elegantly over her 7-month pregnant frame. She thought she looked acceptable. She had failed to account for the cruelty of a world that measured a person's worth by the label on their back. On the evening of the gala, as she stood before the cracked mirror in their small bedroom, a wave of profound insecurity washed over her. The dress felt like a costume, a poor imitation of the glamour she was about to face. Leo came up behind her, his reflection joining hers. He didn't see the cheap fabric or the second-hand shoes. He saw his wife, the mother of his child, her face glowing with a luminous beauty that no designer could ever create. He pressed a small, cool object into her palm. She opened her hand to find a small wooden bird, exquisitely carved from a piece of driftwood. Its wings were outstretched, poised for flight. "I made this for you," he whispered, his lips brushing her ear, "so that when you're in that room, surrounded by all those peacocks, you remember you have wings. You can fly above it all." Tears pricked her eyes. She clutched the bird, its smooth, polished wood a tangible piece of his love. It was their symbol, a reminder of the small, perfect world they had built, a world of art and poetry and quiet understanding. As she slipped it into the pocket of her dress, she felt a surge of courage. She wasn't just Isabella, the woman in the cheap dress. She was Leo's wife, his true north, and for him she would brave the lion's den. But as she stepped out of the taxi and onto the glaring, unforgiving stage of the red carpet, the wooden bird in her pocket felt terrifyingly small against the vast, cold emptiness of the gilded cage she was walking into. The red carpet was less a pathway and more a battleground. It was a river of crimson fabric flooded by a torrent of flashing lights and insincere smiles. For the city's elite, it was a familiar stage, a place to display their plumage of couture gowns and jewels that cost more than the annual income of a small country. For Isabella, it was a gauntlet of judgment. She held on to Leo's arm, her knuckles a stark white against the dark sleeve of his rented tuxedo. He was a study in tense discomfort, his artist's soul rebelling against the rigid confines of the suit and the superficiality of the spectacle. But he was trying for her. He smiled for the cameras, a tight, forced expression that didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were only for Isabella, a constant, worried flicker in her direction. The whispers began almost immediately, a low, sibilant hiss that coiled around them like smoke. At first, they were just out of earshot, but as they moved further down the line, the comments grew bolder, sharper. "Who is that?" A woman with diamonds dripping from her ears murmured to her companion, her painted lips curled in a sneer. "She looks like she wandered in from the staff entrance." "That's Leo Rossi's wife," her friend replied, her voice dripping with condescension. "The artist. Apparently he has a penchant for charity projects." A ripple of cruel laughter followed them. Isabella felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. She tried to focus on Leo's hand, on the solid weight of him beside her, but the words were like tiny poisoned darts, each one finding its mark. She instinctively pulled her thin wrap tighter around her shoulders, as if she could physically shield herself from their scorn. A notorious gossip columnist, a piranha in a sequined dress, blocked their path, her microphone extended like a weapon. "Leo Rossi, the art world is buzzing. Tell us, who are you wearing tonight?" she chirped, her eyes scanning his suit with practiced appraisal. "It's a tuxedo," Leo said flatly, his patience wearing thin. The columnist's smile didn't falter. She turned her laser-like gaze on Isabella. "And your lovely wife? What a quaint dress. It's very maternal. Is it a vintage piece?" The word vintage was laced with a meaning that was anything but complimentary. Isabella's mouth went dry. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, dissecting the simple velvet, the slightly frayed hem she'd tried so hard to mend. The swell of her stomach that seemed, under this intense scrutiny, grotesque and ungainly. Before she could find her voice, Leo stepped slightly in front of her, a protective gesture that was both loving and, in this environment, utterly futile. "My wife looks beautiful," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And her dress is none of your business." The columnist, sensing a story, pressed on. "Just a simple question, Mr. Rossi. Our readers are curious. In a world of Versace and Dior, it's a bold choice." Isabella placed a calming hand on Leo's arm. She could feel the tremor of anger running through him. A scene would only make it worse. She gave the woman a small, dignified smile. "It's a dress made of love," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but clear and steady. "It's the only label that matters to me." The columnist blinked, momentarily thrown off by the sincerity of the response, but she recovered quickly, turning to her cameraman with a dismissive smirk. The message was clear. This woman was a nobody, a naive fool who didn't understand the rules of their world. As they finally escaped the red carpet and entered the grand foyer of the museum, the assault continued. The whispers were now accompanied by pointed fingers and pitying glances. They saw Leo as a rising star tethered to a stone. They saw her as an unfortunate temporary accessory, a rival artist, a man known for his flashy commercial work, and even flashier wife cornered Leo. "Rossi, good to see you, old man," he boomed, clapping Leo on the back. His wife, a woman who looked as if she'd been sculpted from ice, let her gaze drift over Isabella from head to toe, her disdain palpable. "I see you brought the missus. How domestic of you." "Behave, darling," the Ice Queen murmured, though her eyes sparkled with malice. "She can't help it. Pregnancy is so unflattering on some women." The word struck Isabella with the force of a physical blow. All the joy and wonder she felt about the new life growing inside her curdled into shame. In their world, her pregnancy wasn't a miracle. It was a social liability, an aesthetic flaw. Leo's face was a thundercloud. "If you'll excuse us," he gritted out, grabbing Isabella's hand and pulling her away towards the relative anonymity of the crowded ballroom. He led her to a small secluded alcove behind a large marble pillar. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "Don't listen to them, Isa. They're empty. Hollow people with hollow hearts. You are worth more than all of them combined." She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his unwavering love. But the damage was done. The joy of the evening, the pride she felt for her husband, had been tarnished. She felt like an imposter, a trespasser in a world of silk and satin, where she, in her simple velvet, would never belong. She reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around the smooth, familiar shape of the wooden bird. It was a small, secret comfort, a reminder of a world where she was loved and valued. But as the sound of champagne flutes and brittle laughter echoed around them, she wondered if that small world was enough to protect her from the vast, glittering cruelty of this one. The grand ballroom was an overwhelming assault on the senses. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small carriage, dripped light onto a sea of impeccably dressed guests. The air was thick with the competing scents of expensive perfume and the low, constant hum of self-important conversation. For Isabella, it felt like drowning. The whispers had followed them from the red carpet, and every smile seemed to hide a sneer. Every glance felt like an evaluation she was failing. Leo was quickly swallowed by a group of critics and gallery owners, all eager to praise the new prodigy. He kept looking back at her, a worried crease between his brows. But she waved him on, forcing a smile she didn't feel. She knew this was his moment, and she refused to be the anchor that dragged him down. Needing a moment to breathe, to escape the suffocating opulence, she slipped away, finding a glass door that led to a small, deserted stone balcony. The cool night air was a balm on her flushed skin. The noise of the gala faded to a muted roar, replaced by the distant, rhythmic pulse of the city. Leaning against the cold stone balustrade, she looked out at the sprawling tapestry of lights, feeling utterly and completely alone. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't immediately notice the quiet sob. She turned to see a young woman in a crisp, white waitress uniform huddled in the far corner of the balcony, her shoulders shaking. Beside her, on the ground, was a shattered champagne flute in a dark, spreading stain on the stone. The young woman looked up, her eyes wide with panic as she saw Isabella. "Oh, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll clean this up right away. Please don't tell my supervisor." Her name tag read, Chloe. She couldn't have been more than 19, her face a mixture of youthful hope and the stark fear of someone who desperately needed her job. In that moment, Isabella didn't see a waitress. She saw a reflection of a younger version of herself, a girl trying to navigate a world that felt too big and too unforgiving. Forgetting her own turmoil, Isabella's compassion took over. "It's all right," she said, her voice soft and reassuring. "Accidents happen." She walked over and knelt down, her swollen belly making the movement awkward. "Let me help you." "Oh, no, ma'am, you can't. Your dress!" Chloe protested, her eyes wide with alarm. "It's just a dress," Isabella said, smiling gently. She began carefully picking up the larger shards of glass, placing them on a cocktail napkin. Chloe, seeing the genuine kindness in her eyes, grabbed a handful of napkins and began blotting the spilled champagne. They worked in a comfortable silence for a few moments, the shared, simple task creating an unlikely intimacy. "It's my first week," Chloe finally whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I was so nervous. My hands were shaking." and I just dropped it. Mr. Henderson, the catering manager, he said one more mistake and I'm out. Mr. Henderson sounds like he needs a vacation, Isabella said with a wry smile. She looked at the young woman, her heart aching with empathy. You're doing a wonderful job. This place is intimidating. Chloe let out a small, watery laugh. You're telling me all these people, they look at you like you're not even there, like you're just part of the furniture. I know the feeling, Isabella said quietly, the words more true than Chloe could possibly know. Once the mess was cleared, Chloe stood up, wringing the damp napkins in her hands. Thank you, ma'am. Really, you didn't have to do that. My name is Isabella, she said, holding out her hand. The girl's eyes widened as she hesitantly shook it. Chloe, it's an honor, Isabella. There was a moment of pure human connection on that balcony, far removed from the performative society inside. It was a moment of shared vulnerability, of quiet grace. Chloe saw a kind woman, not an ill-dressed outcast. And Isabella, in helping Chloe, had inadvertently helped herself. The simple act of kindness had grounded her, stripping away the layers of insecurity and shame the evening had heaped upon her. It was a powerful reminder of who she was at her core. A woman who helped, a woman who saw the person, not the uniform. You should get back inside, Chloe said, her voice full of genuine concern. You'll catch a cold out here. I will in a minute, Isabella replied. Take a deep breath, Chloe. You've got this. The young waitress gave her a grateful, genuine smile. The first real smile Isabella had seen all night. As Chloe slipped back into the ballroom, Isabella stayed for another moment, her hand resting on her belly. The baby kicked, a small, reassuring flutter. She took a deep breath of the cool night air, the earlier panic having subsided, replaced by a sense of calm resolve. The people inside, with their glittering jewels and sharp tongues, couldn't touch her. Their judgment was a reflection of their own emptiness, not her worth. She had love. She had a life growing inside her, and she had a capacity for kindness that was worth more than all the diamonds in the ballroom. Her fingers found the wooden bird in her pocket. It no longer felt small and fragile. It felt like a promise. With her head held high, Isabella de la Torre Rossi turned and walked back into the lion's den. No longer a victim, but a woman armed with the quiet, unshakable power of her own grace. Returning to the ballroom felt different. The opulence that had once intimidated Isabella now seemed strangely hollow. The glittering facade of the guests appeared brittle, their laughter sharp and forced. Her brief encounter with Chloe had shifted her perspective, like adjusting the focus on a camera lens. She no longer saw a room full of judges. She saw a collection of lonely, insecure people hiding behind walls of wealth and status. Leo found her near the edge of the room, his face etched with worry. Isa, where did you go? I was looking everywhere for you. I just needed some air, she said, squeezing his hand. She gave him a smile that, for the first time that night, reached her eyes. I'm okay, Leo. Really. He searched her face, sensing the subtle change in her demeanor. The fear and hurt he'd seen earlier had been replaced by a quiet strength, a serene confidence that puzzled but relieved him. Their assigned table was a microcosm of the gala's social hierarchy. They were seated with the flashy artist, Roman Blackwood, and his glacial wife, Serafina, along with an elderly couple, the Vanderbilts, whose name was synonymous with old money and even older prejudices. It was, Isabella realized, a table designed for maximum discomfort. Roman, who viewed Leo's raw, emotional work as a threat to his own commercial success, immediately launched into a series of backhanded compliments. Rossi, your sculpture is rustic, so much raw energy. It takes real courage to present something so unpolished in a setting like this. My work is honest, Roman, Leo replied, his tone clipped. It's not designed to match someone's sofa. Serafina, meanwhile, directed her attention to Isabella. I must admit, I was surprised to hear you were expecting, she said, her voice as smooth and cold as marble. An artist's career is so demanding. A child can be such a distraction. Don't you agree, Mrs. Vanderbilt? Mrs. Vanderbilt, a woman who looked like she'd been sucking on a lemon for 80 years, peered at Isabella over her diamond-rimmed glasses. Indeed, lineage is everything, of course, but one must be practical. Children require resources and a proper upbringing. Her gaze flickered over Isabella's simple dress, her meaning perfectly clear. Isabella felt a familiar sting of anger, but it was distant now, buffered by her newfound resolve. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture that was both maternal and defiant. "I believe a child requires love more than resources," she said, her voice calm and even. "And I think being a mother will only make my husband a better artist. It will teach him a depth of love he can pour into his work. It's an inspiration, not a distraction." Her words hung in the air, a simple, heartfelt truth in a space filled with calculated artifice. Serafina merely raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, while Mrs. Vanderbilt sniffed with disapproval. But for a fleeting second, Isabella saw a flicker of something in Mr. Vanderbilt's eyes. Not approval, perhaps, but a grudging respect. The conversation moved on, a minefield of passive-aggressive remarks and blatant snobbery. They spoke of summering in the Hamptons, of ski trips to Gstaad, of the difficulty in finding good help. Isabella and Leo remained silent, their hands clasped together under the table. Isabella's thumb stroked the back of Leo's hand, calming the anger she knew was simmering just beneath the surface. She found herself clutching the small wooden bird in her pocket. Its smooth, familiar shape was an anchor in this turbulent sea of arrogance. It reminded her of Leo's love, of their small, cluttered apartment, of a life rich in things money couldn't buy. She thought of Chloe the waitress, of the shared moment of grace on the balcony. These were the things that were real. This peacock display of wealth and status, was the illusion. Serafina, relentless in her cruelty, turned her attention back to Isabella. "You know, I read that you're a translator," she said, as if discussing a curious and slightly distasteful hobby. "How fascinating. Do you do it for fun, or is it a necessity?" The question was a direct, undisguised jab at their financial situation. The whole table went quiet, waiting for the response. Leo started to speak, his voice tight with fury, but Isabella silenced him with a gentle squeeze of his hand. She looked directly at Serafina, her gaze unwavering. "I do it because I love language," she said simply. "I love the way it builds bridges between people and cultures. It's a privilege to be able to move between worlds, to help one voice understand another." She paused, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "Some people are fluent in 4 languages. Others can't even speak one with any real kindness. I suppose we all have our skills." A stunned silence fell over the table. Roman Blackwood choked on his wine. Mr. Vanderbilt's lips twitched, hiding a smile. Serafina's face for the first time lost its icy composure, her cheeks flushing a dull, angry red. She had expected a flustered, embarrassed response from the poor, pregnant wife. She had not expected to be so elegantly and decisively put in her place. Before she could retaliate, the lights in the ballroom dimmed and a spotlight hit the stage. A distinguished, silver-haired man walked to the podium. The hum of conversation died down, replaced by a sense of hushed anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man began, his voice warm and resonant, "welcome to the Innovators of Tomorrow Gala. I am Alistair Finch, the chairman of the foundation." He spoke for several minutes about the foundation's work, about supporting the arts and sciences, about nurturing the next generation of talent. Then, his tone grew more serious. "As many of you know," he said, "our foundation has faced significant financial challenges this past year. Several of our key patrons were forced to withdraw their support. We were at a point where we feared we would have to close our doors forever." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. "But then," Alistair continued, a smile breaking across his face, "a miracle happened. An anonymous benefactor stepped forward. Someone who believes so deeply in our mission that they have made a donation that not only saves this foundation, but will allow us to expand our work for the next 50 years. The room erupted in gasps and applause. This was the real story of the night. "This person," Alistair said, his voice filled with emotion, "is the epitome of humility. They asked for no recognition, no naming rights, no fanfare. They are a person of immense wealth, but even greater integrity. After much persuasion, they have agreed to come up and say a few words, not for their own glory, but to inspire others." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was craning their necks, whispering, speculating. Who could it be? A tech billionaire? A foreign royal? Isabella leaned over to Leo. "Isn't that wonderful?" she whispered, her heart genuinely filled with joy for the foundation's good fortune. Leo nodded, his arm wrapping around her shoulder. "It's incredible. It restores your faith in people." On stage, Alistair Finch beamed. "It is my profound honor to introduce you to the person who has secured the future of innovation for generations to come. Please welcome to the stage the sole heir to the Della Torre industrial fortune and our foundation's savior, Ms. Isabella Della Torre." The name echoed through the cavernous ballroom, followed by a silence so profound it was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. 1,000 guests, 100 waiters, an army of photographers, all frozen in a state of collective disbelief. Isabella de la Torre. For a moment, the name just hung there, disconnected from anyone present. The crowd scanned the room, their eyes darting from one powerful heiress to another, searching for the face that matched the legendary, reclusive name. The De La Torre fortune was the stuff of myths, a global empire built in silence. Its patriarch, Santiago de la Torre, a man so private he hadn't been photographed in 30 years. His wealth was old, vast, and quiet, dwarfing the new money that glittered so garishly in this very room. At their table, Serafina Blackwood let out a small, confused laugh. "Isabella de la Torre, is that a joke? Alistair must be losing his mind." Leo, too, was looking around, a bewildered expression on his face. "De la Torre," he murmured, the name unfamiliar to him. He squeezed Isabella's hand. "I wonder who she is." But Isabella wasn't looking around. She was looking at the stage, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and resignation. The secret she had guarded for so long, the identity she had shed like a second skin, was about to be reclaimed in the most public way imaginable. Alistair Finch, still beaming from the stage, raised his hand and pointed. Not into the crowd of famous faces at the front, but directly towards the table in the back. Directly at the pregnant woman in the simple blue velvet dress. "Our benefactor," he announced, his voice booming with pride. "Isabella de la Torre Rossi." And then it happened. 1,000 heads turned in unison. 1,000 pairs of eyes, once filled with scorn, pity, and derision, now widened in absolute, earth-shattering shock. They stared at Isabella, their minds struggling to reconcile the image of the poor, awkward wife with the mythical name of the De La Torre heiress. The camera flashes, which had so studiously ignored her on the red carpet, now exploded in a frantic, blinding frenzy. The photographers, who had dismissed her as irrelevant, scrambled over each other, their lenses swinging towards her as if she were the center of the universe. The silence was shattered by a tidal wave of gasps and frantic whispers. "Her? That's Isabella de la Torre. It can't be." But Alistair said, "My God, look at her dress. She was hiding in plain sight." The revelation hit their table like a physical blow. Mrs. Vanderbilt's jaw dropped, her carefully constructed mask of aristocratic disdain crumbling into dust. Roman Blackwood stared, his mouth agape, the condescending smirk wiped clean from his face. And Serafina looked as if she had been slapped. Her face, a mask of icy composure moments before, was now a canvas of horror, humiliation, and dawning, sickening realization. The woman she had mocked, belittled, and dismissed as a charity project held the power to buy and sell her entire world 100 times over. But the most profound shock was etched on the face of the man beside her. Leo stared at his wife, his own Isabella, as if he were seeing her for the first time. The woman who shared his tiny apartment, who worried about their grocery bills, who wore second-hand clothes, was the heiress to one of the largest fortunes on the planet. The secret she had held in her heart was not a small story of a difficult past. It was an epic of unimaginable wealth. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. Their entire life, the beautiful, simple reality they had built, suddenly felt like a lie. Isabella slowly pushed back her chair, her movements graceful and deliberate. She gave Leo's hand one last, reassuring squeeze, though her own hand was trembling. Her eyes, full of a love and apology he couldn't yet comprehend, met his for a brief, intense moment. Then she turned. The walk to the stage was the longest of her life. The sea of shocked faces parted for her as she moved through the ballroom. The whispers now were not of scorn, but of awe and disbelief. Every eye was locked on her, on the pregnant woman in the simple velvet dress who had just become the most powerful person in the room. She didn't look at any of them. She didn't look at the horrified face of Serafina or the gaping mouth of the gossip columnist who had mocked her. Her gaze was fixed on the stage, a small island of light in a sea of confusion. She could feel the wooden bird in her pocket, a small, hard point of reality in a world that had just turned upside down. She wasn't walking to the stage as Leo's wife or as a woman to be judged. She was ascending as Isabella della Torre, a name she had long tried to forget, but which she now had to embrace. The unveiling was complete. The world now knew her name, but they had no idea who she truly was. As Isabella reached the small set of stairs leading to the stage, Alistair Finch came forward, his hand extended to help her up. It was a gesture of deference and profound respect, a stark contrast to the dismissive glances she had endured all evening. She took his hand, and as she stepped into the warm, bright circle of the spotlight, a hush fell over the ballroom. She stood at the podium, a lone, gentle figure against the vast, dark backdrop of the room. Her pregnancy was now not a flaw, but a symbol of life, of future, of legacy. Her simple dress, once an object of ridicule, now seemed an emblem of her humility, a quiet rebuke to the ostentatious wealth that surrounded her. She looked out at the sea of faces, the same faces that had judged her so harshly just moments before, now upturned and rapt with attention. She saw confusion, awe, and in many cases a creeping, sickening shame. Her eyes scanned the crowd until she found him. Leo. He was still sitting at the table, looking utterly lost, his face a maelstrom of shock, hurt, and bewilderment. Their gazes locked across the crowded room, and in that silent, charged space, she tried to convey everything she couldn't yet say. "I love you. I'm sorry. Please understand." Then she turned to the microphone. Her hands, which had been trembling, were now perfectly still as she rested them on the podium. She took a deep, calming breath and began to speak. Her voice, when it came, was not loud or commanding. It was soft, clear, and filled with an emotional resonance that captivated every person in the room. "Good evening," she began. "My name is Isabella della Torre, and I apologize for the theatricality of this announcement. My father, Santiago della Torre, was a man who treasured his privacy above all else. He taught me that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege. It is a tool, he used to say, not a crown. It should be used to build things, to help people, to create beauty. It should never be used to build walls around your heart." She paused, letting the words settle. There was no trace of anger or vengeance in her tone, only a profound, gentle sincerity. "My father passed away 6 months ago," she continued, her voice catching slightly, "and he left me with that responsibility. For a long time, I ran from it. I was afraid of it. I was afraid the world would only ever see the name, the fortune, and not the person. So I built a different life for myself, a simple life, a life built on love, not on legacy." Her eyes flickered back to Leo. "I fell in love with a brilliant artist, a man who creates beauty out of discarded things, who sees the soul in a piece of rusted metal or splintered wood. He taught me that true value has nothing to do with a price tag. He built a world for me where I was loved for who I am, not for the name I carry. And I kept this part of myself a secret from him, a decision born of fear, and one I deeply regret. I was afraid that this weight of wealth would shatter the beautiful, simple reality we had created." The confession was raw, personal, and utterly disarming. The gossip-hungry crowd was silenced, humbled by her vulnerability. "Tonight," she said, her voice growing stronger, "I was reminded of why my father valued his privacy. I was reminded of how easily we judge one another, based on the most superficial things. The clothes we wear, the names we carry. We look, but we don't see." She looked directly toward the table where Serafina sat, her face ashen. Isabella's gaze was not accusatory, but filled with a sort of sad understanding. A person's worth is not measured by the label on their dress, but by the kindness in their heart. Integrity is a currency that never devalues. Empathy is the greatest asset one can possess. This foundation, the innovators of tomorrow, exists to support people who understand this. People like my husband, who pursue passion over profit, who strive to create something meaningful in a world that is too often distracted by the meaningless. The donation I have made tonight is not from me, but from my father. It is the fulfillment of his belief that great wealth should be used to foster great minds. It is in honor of all the creators, the dreamers, the innovators who struggle every day for their art. It is a testament to the idea that a single person with a single brilliant idea can change the world. She took a small step back from the podium. Her speech concluded. For a moment, there was only a stunned, absolute silence. Then a single person began to clap. It was Chloe, the young waitress, standing by the service door, her face streaked with tears. Her solitary applause was quickly joined by another and another, until the entire ballroom erupted in a thunderous, sustained standing ovation. It was applause born not just of respect for her wealth, but of genuine admiration for her character, her grace, and her powerful, humbling words. The applause was a deafening wave, but Isabella barely heard it. As she walked off the stage, she was swarmed. The same people who had snubbed her now fell over themselves to get close to her. Hands reached for her, voices called her name, their faces alight with fawning, insincere smiles. Roman Blackwood was suddenly at her elbow, praising her incredible courage. Serafina tried to catch her eye, her expression a desperate mix of apology and fear. The gossip columnist who had mocked her dress was now shouting questions about her philanthropic vision. Isabella ignored them all. She moved through the crowd as if they were ghosts, her eyes fixed on only one person. Leo was making his way towards her, pushing through the throng of new admirers, his face a pale, unreadable mask. Alistair Finch intercepted her, taking her hand. Isabella, that was the most magnificent speech I have ever heard. You have left them all speechless. Thank you, Alistair, she said, her voice strained. But if you'll excuse me, I need to speak to my husband. She finally reached Leo at the edge of the chaos. He took her arm, his grip tight, and without a word led her through a side door and into a quiet, empty corridor. The moment the door clicked shut, sealing them off from the noise of the gala, the fragile composure she had maintained on stage shattered. He let go of her arm and paced the length of the hallway, his hands running through his hair. He looked at her, and the raw hurt in his eyes was a dagger to her heart. All this time, he began, his voice rough with emotion. All this time, Issa, our life, was any of it real? Yes, Leo, all of it, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. The apartment, the struggles, the love, that was real. That was my real life, the only one I ever wanted. But you lied to me, he said, the words torn from him. Every single day. When we were worried about rent, when we were eating pasta for the fourth night in a row because we couldn't afford groceries, you could have solved all our problems with a single phone call. It wasn't about the money, she cried. Don't you see? I didn't want the money. I ran away from it. I met you and you saw me, just me. Not a bank account, not a famous name. If you had known, it would have changed everything. The money would have always been there, a third person in our marriage. I was so afraid of losing what we had, the one pure, real thing in my life. He stopped pacing and faced her, his expression softening slightly as he saw the genuine anguish on her face. So you let me struggle? You let me feel like a failure because I couldn't provide for you, for our child? No, she whispered, shaking her head. I never saw you as a failure. I saw you as a hero. Your passion, your integrity, that's what I fell in love with. You built our life with your own two hands, with your talent. It was a life of value, a life of meaning. Money would have cheapened it. I didn't want to be your patron, Leo. I wanted to be your wife. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden bird he had carved for her. She held it out to him in her trembling palm. Anyway, this, she said, her voice thick with tears. This little bird means more to me than all the Delator billions combined. Because you made it for me. Because it came from your heart, from your love. That is the only wealth I have ever truly wanted. He looked down at the bird, then back up at her face, at the woman he loved, whose life was suddenly a mystery to him. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea for understanding. He thought of all the little things, her fluency in languages, her quiet knowledge of art and history, a certain innate grace she possessed that had always seemed at odds with her humble circumstances. The pieces were finally clicking into place. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He gently took the wooden bird from her hand and then, with his other hand, he wiped the tears from her cheeks. "I fell in love with Isabella," he said softly, his voice full of a weary, dawning understanding. "Not Isabella de la Torre, just Isabella, the woman who reads poetry in the rain and who makes me believe I can fly." "I am still that woman," she sobbed, leaning her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against him, his own emotions finally breaking through. "I know," he breathed into her hair. "I know, it's just a lot to take in." He held her for a long moment, the two of them a small, silent island in the storm of their upended lives. The reconciliation was not yet complete, the questions not yet fully answered. But in that quiet corridor, away from the prying eyes of a world that would never understand, the foundation of their love, though shaken, held firm. They had a long road ahead, but they would walk it together. The months that followed the gala were a whirlwind of change. The world, now aware of Isabella's identity, clamored for her attention. Paparazzi camped outside their small apartment building. Tabloids spun wild, fantastical stories about the billionaire pauper. Invitations, business proposals, and pleas for money flooded their mailbox. But Isabella, with Leo's quiet support, met the storm with the same grace she had shown on stage. She hired a small, trusted team to manage her father's estate and the newly formed De La Torre Foundation. Her first official act was to create a grant specifically for emerging artists who, like Leo, valued artistic integrity over commercial appeal. It was called the Wooden Bird Grant. They left the small, cluttered apartment that had been their sanctuary. The memories were too precious to be tainted by the constant media siege, but they didn't move into a sprawling, empty mansion. Isabella purchased a beautiful, light-filled brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It was large enough for their growing family and for the massive canvases Leo now painted on, but it was a home, not a palace. The walls were quickly filled not with expensive, curated art, but with Leo's vibrant work and the mismatched furniture they had collected over the years. The biggest change was in Leo. Freed from the constant, crushing pressure of financial survival, his art exploded with a newfound freedom and confidence. His work became bolder, more ambitious. He had his first solo show at a prestigious gallery, and it sold out on the opening night. But the success didn't change him. He would still end each day covered in paint, his hands stained with color, and the first thing he would do was find Isabella and hold her. The money had given him opportunity, but she had always been his inspiration. Their conversations in those months were long and deep. He asked about her childhood, and she finally unlocked the door to her past, telling him of the lonely gilded cage she had grown up in. She spoke of a father who loved her, but who expressed it through trusts and stock portfolios, rather than hugs and bedtime stories. Leo in turn confessed his insecurities, his fear that he would be seen as Mr. De La Torre, a man living in his wife's shadow. Together they navigated this strange new world, their love the compass that guided them. They learned that her wealth did not have to be a wall between them, but could be a bridge to building the life they had always dreamed of. One crisp autumn afternoon, 9 months after the night of the gala, Isabella gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Santiago, after her father, but they called him Santi. He had Isabella's calm, watchful eyes and Leo's unruly dark curls. The final scene of their transformation did not take place in a grand ballroom or a corporate boardroom. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning in the sun-drenched living room of their new home. Isabella was sitting on a soft rug, rocking a sleeping Santi in her arms. Leo was sketching in a notebook, not a grand artistic statement, but a simple, tender drawing of his wife and son. The house was quiet, filled with the peaceful domestic sounds of a new family. There were no whispers, no judgments, no flashing lights. There was only love. Isabella looked from her sleeping son to her husband, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The journey had been tumultuous. The secrets, the revelations, the sudden, jarring shift in their reality. It had tested them in ways they could never have imagined. But they had emerged from the fire not scorched, but forged stronger, their love tempered into something unbreakable. Leo looked up from his sketchbook and smiled, a genuine, easy smile that lit up his entire face. He tore the page from his book and handed it to her. It was a perfect, intimate portrait of her and Santi, a moment of pure love captured in graphite and paper. She took the drawing, her fingers tracing the lines of her own face, the soft curve of her baby's head. This was their new legacy. Not the industrial empire, not the billion-dollar foundation, but this quiet moment, this family, this love. She had once been the girl in the simple velvet dress, mocked and dismissed by the world. But now, holding her son in the drawing from her husband, she knew with absolute certainty that she was the richest woman on earth. True wealth was not something you inherited. It was something you built day by day with a foundation of love, a framework of kindness, and a legacy of grace that no amount of money could ever buy. Isabella's journey from a mocked and misunderstood figure to a celebrated philanthropist shows us the incredible power of staying true to oneself. By choosing humility over hubris and love over legacy, she not only transformed her own life, but also challenged an entire world to redefine its understanding of worth. Her story is a powerful reminder that the most valuable assets we possess are kindness, integrity, and the love we share with others. In the end, she didn't just inherit a fortune, she built a legacy of compassion that would inspire generations. We hope this story touched your heart. If it did, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribing to our channel for more inspiring stories. Welcome to our channel. In our uplifting tale, the most dramatic turning point comes when Sasha is wrongly accused of leaking vital information, and she must race against time with Remy to prove her innocence. If you're eager to find out how these high-stakes twists conclude and whether justice finally prevails, be sure to follow the entire story right to its remarkable ending. We invite you to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives and share your thoughts in the comments below, letting us know where you're listening from. Late-night rain in Clifton Heights was never kind to anyone, but the relentless downpour this particular evening felt especially punishing. Blurred headlights streaked across the slick streets, and neon signs buzzed as they struggled against the unyielding cascade. In the heart of this dreary neighborhood, a modest diner stood out, its warm glow and flickering red sign promising comfort, or at least a small reprieve from the storm. Through the fogged windows of that modest eatery, Sasha Greenwood was wiping down tables after the last of the regulars had finally left. She had rich mahogany skin and tired eyes that hinted at her daily marathon of double shifts. Yet even exhaustion could not dim the soft spark of kindness that illuminated her face. She often told herself that while tips might be scarce, human compassion never had to be. It was nearly closing time, and the staff was running on fumes. The cook had left an hour earlier, and the busboy was mopping floors in the back. Sasha was about to close up when she caught sight of someone outside the diner. A small silhouette hunched over in a wheelchair, half covered by a frayed blanket. Alarm shot through her. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and in that flash of lightning, she saw him more clearly. A boy with dark, damp hair plastered to his forehead, face pallid with cold. She paused, her cleaning rag in hand, heart thudding with concern. As the exterior neon sign buzzed erratically, she realized he was trembling. There was no way, she thought, that she would lock up and leave him out there. Setting the rag aside, Sasha pushed through the front door. The moment she stepped outside, the icy wind lashed at her, soaking through her clothes. Water seeped into her slip-resistant work shoes, reminding her just how few resources she had at her disposal. But none of that mattered, because the look in the boy's eyes told her everything she needed to know. He was alone, and he was frightened. She crouched by the wheelchair, arms shaking from the cold but voice steady with concern. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, soft but firm. "What are you doing out here all by yourself? It's too cold for you to be waiting in this weather." The boy's eyes darted uncertainly. He hesitated, clutching that threadbare blanket as if it were a lifeline. Finally, he mustered a quiet reply. "I'm waiting for my dad," he managed, glancing at the empty street. "He said he'd come back." The forlorn note in his voice tugged at Sasha's heart. She scanned the deserted sidewalk, illuminated only by a lone street lamp and the flicker of a pawn shop's neon sign across the road. Not a soul was in sight. "All right," she said, keeping her tone as soothing as she could. But I can't let you stay out here in the rain like this. That's not safe. Come inside with me for a bit, okay? She offered a gentle smile, pushing the wheelchair toward the door. The boy didn't resist. In fact, he looked more relieved than anything else. Within seconds, the dull roar of the storm was replaced by the diner's comforting warmth. Unbeknownst to Sasha, someone was watching from across the street. A sleek black luxury sedan sat idling in the shadows. The figure inside it had been observing her every move. His name was Remy Delacroix, a powerful billionaire whose commanding presence in corporate boardrooms had made him both revered and feared. And in the back of his mind, he kept replaying one fact. That small boy was Theo Delacroix, his son. Remy was late because of a high-stakes phone call with international investors, and he had told Theo to wait by the diner's entrance. Yet even as he concluded his final words to the people on the other end of his mobile, he'd seen Sasha's compassionate act, an act that would set into motion a chain of events neither Sasha nor Remy could have anticipated. Inside the diner, Sasha was already busy prepping a meal. She knew in her gut that a warm sandwich and hot soup could do more than nourish the body. They also had a knack for restoring a shred of dignity and security. As she set a plate of golden grilled cheese and a bowl of steaming tomato soup in front of the trembling boy, she said gently, "It's on the house. Promise." She introduced herself too. "I'm Sasha Greenwood. And you?" The boy looked at her with wide eyes, as if unsure whether he could trust her kindness. Then tentatively, he replied, "I'm Theo." And for the first time in that rain-soaked night, a flicker of hope softened Theo's anxious features. While Theo began to eat, Sasha discreetly watched him, wanting to make sure he felt safe. She could see the tension gradually leaving his small frame, his shoulders relaxing beneath that thin blanket. Outside, the rain's relentless drumming against the diner's windows provided an oddly reassuring soundtrack to their late-night encounter. The diner's fluorescent lighting illuminated the boy's pale cheeks. As he chewed on the grilled cheese sandwich, Sasha noticed his cheeks turning pinker, a small sign that warmth was returning to him. For Sasha, it was second nature to offer kindness whenever she could. She had grown up in a hard neighborhood, where every small gesture of goodwill might be the difference between hope and despair. Her mother, who had passed away only a few years prior, used to say, "Kindness doesn't come with a price tag, Sasha. You never know who needs it the most." Those words guided Sasha's every action, from the way she greeted gruff customers to the way she extended support to anyone who seemed down on their luck. Doing the right thing was a habit she clung to, even when her own financial struggles loomed over her every day. Across the street, Remy Delacroix lowered his cell phone. The conversation with his investors finally concluded. He was a man known for his steely resolve and an intellect that had built an empire spanning tech startups, real estate, and venture capital. At 48, he carried himself with a certain calculated precision, believing that sentiment was a distraction he could ill afford. Ever since his divorce and Theo's diagnosis, Remy had grown even more guarded. He had learned to rely on strategy and control, rarely letting others glimpse what lay beneath that polished facade. But tonight, something about Sasha's simple act of caring, it startled him, pricking at a corner of his heart that he'd left dormant for too long. Remy tapped a button on the car's armrest, lowering the tinted window a fraction, just enough to see inside the diner. He watched Sasha bend to wipe tomato soup from Theo's chin, her smile as warm as the neon lights were cold. An unsettled feeling stirred in him. Was this truly an act of altruism, or was there some ulterior motive? In his world, everyone had motives, often guided by ambition, greed, or desperation. Could it be different this time? He dialed his trusted assistant, Naomi Shepard. She had worked with him for years, becoming something of a shadow at Holt Delacroix Enterprises, anticipating his moves and facilitating his every demand. When she answered, he spoke in a low, clipped tone. "Naomi, I need you at the Clifton Heights Diner in 20 minutes. Dressed down, no corporate airs, and I want details on the waitress who just fed Theo." A brief silence lingered on the line. Then Naomi replied, "Understood," before he ended the call. Inside the diner, Sasha continued to keep Theo engaged in conversation, hoping to distract him from whatever anxieties he was grappling with. She learned that he was about 10 years old, bright but reserved, and that he used a wheelchair due to complications from a spinal condition. His father, Theo said, was supposed to pick him up soon, though the boy didn't specify what was keeping him. Sasha didn't press. She just made sure he was warm, full, and not scared. She offered him an extra blanket from the diner's back closet, a relic she sometimes used on her own lunch breaks when the place got too drafty. In those moments, Sasha felt protective, almost maternal. She worried about the absent father, uncertain whether he was truly on the way or had abandoned his child. Looking at Theo's thin jacket and scuffed wheelchair, she couldn't help but wonder about the boy's circumstances. Was he neglected, or was his father simply delayed by forces beyond his control? She hoped for the latter. Experience, however, had taught her to prepare for the worst. As she watched Theo polish off the final crust of grilled cheese, a wave of relief swept over her. At least he had eaten something warm and safe tonight. She bent down to pick up the plate, resisting a wince of pain in her tired feet. She forced a small laugh. "Feel better now?" Theo nodded shyly, the hint of a smile lighting up his face. For just a heartbeat, the clatter of raindrops outside seemed almost peaceful, a reminder that sometimes solace could be found even in the harshest conditions. The respite, however, was fleeting. Within minutes, the diner's front door swung open. A gust of cold air rushed in as a woman stepped through, water dripping from the hood of her worn jacket. She scanned the room quickly, her gaze landing on Theo. Sasha's pulse quickened. The newcomer radiated an air of cool efficiency, the kind Sasha recognized in certain customers, especially those who could switch from polite to intimidating in a split second. "Hi there, little man," the woman said, her voice oddly cheerful but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "Ready to head out?" She glanced at Sasha with a tight smile. "I'm Naomi, a friend of Theo's father." Theo studied Naomi with a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. Sasha noted that he neither smiled nor seemed excited. "Dad sent you?" Theo asked, fiddling nervously with the edge of his blanket. Naomi nodded, placing one hand on the wheelchair's handle. Sasha felt an immediate need to intervene. Something about Naomi's manner reminded her of the countless times she had seen children handed off without any real warmth or reassurance. She turned to Theo, her voice gentle. "Is this someone you know well? Are you all right with leaving now?" Theo gave a small shrug, eyes darting between Sasha and Naomi. "I guess," he said, voice trembling just enough to betray some uncertainty. His father had said to wait, so presumably the woman was legitimate. But Sasha's instincts wouldn't let the matter rest. She angled herself slightly, blocking Naomi's path. "Mind telling me a bit more about who you are?" Sasha asked, trying to keep her tone polite. Her question caused Naomi's lips to tense, though her smile remained. "I'm just following Mr. Delacroix's instructions," Naomi said calmly. "He's waiting across the street." She gestured vaguely in the direction of the luxury sedan. "He's had some urgent matters to handle, so he asked me to fetch Theo." Sasha glanced toward the street but saw only the ceaseless rain and the faint glow of headlights. Something about the vague explanation made her uneasy. Still, she recognized the precarious position she was in. She was merely a waitress, and interfering too aggressively might land her in trouble. She also knew the unfortunate reality. A black woman challenging a stranger's intentions could escalate quickly, especially when that stranger carried an air of wealth or power. Still, Sasha couldn't relinquish her concern. She dropped to one knee beside Theo, meeting his gaze. "Will you promise me something?" she asked softly. "If you ever need help, if you're ever alone out there, you come back to this diner. I'll be here." Theo's eyes locked on hers. He gave a small nod. The tension in his face lessened just a bit, like he drew strength from her words. Naomi cleared her throat. "We should get going now. Mr. Delacroix is waiting and Theo needs to be home." Without further protest, she maneuvered the wheelchair around Sasha, guiding Theo toward the door. The bell above the entrance jingled, its tinny sound swallowed by the roar of the storm. Watching them go, Sasha felt a tightening in her chest, an inexplicable foreboding. Theo looked back at her once before disappearing into the rain. In the short time she'd known him, Sasha had glimpsed the vulnerability in his eyes. Something about this entire situation felt off-kilter, like a puzzle with a few missing pieces. Maybe it was just her overactive imagination born out of caution. Or maybe she was seeing the first hints of a deeper story about to unfold. Just as the door swung shut, Sasha caught sight of the silhouette waiting under the faint glow of the diner's sign. The tall figure lingered near the black sedan, carefully overseeing Naomi and Theo's departure. He wore a dark coat that looked too refined for this rundown neighborhood. Although Sasha only glimpsed his face for a moment, she memorized its severe lines, chiseled features, and intense expression. Then the car door opened, and the figure slipped inside, leaving nothing behind but the faint hum of an engine and the pounding of rain. Sasha tried to shake off the unsettled feeling as she locked up for the night, but something about the entire encounter clung to her thoughts like a lingering echo. She made her way home, a cramped studio apartment in a peeling brick building that had seen better days. With her soaked sneakers squelching against the worn floorboards, she flipped on the single overhead light, revealing a sparse interior. A thrift store couch, a small television, and a kitchen area barely big enough for one person to stand in. Still, it was hers, a place she fought hard to keep. After drying off, she reheated some leftover pasta, but found herself too distracted to enjoy it. She couldn't stop replaying the events at the diner. Theo's uncertain smile, Naomi's stoic demeanor, and the distant, watchful figure by the sedan. The next morning would mean another day of hustle, a few hours of rest, then back to the diner for an early shift. But even her exhaustion couldn't quell the insistent tug in her mind that told her something was amiss. Just as she lay down on her lumpy mattress, hugging a pillow that had lost most of its fluff, there was a firm knock at her door. Her heart hammered in her chest. No one visited at this hour unless it was a neighbor complaining about noise or someone pushing flyers for a local campaign. Another knock, more insistent this time. She hesitated before padding over, resting an eye against the peephole. What she saw made her breath catch. It was the tall man from outside the diner, the one who had been standing beside the sedan. For a moment she considered not answering, but his posture, rigid, purposeful, suggested that he wouldn't leave easily. Slowly she turned the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. "Who are you?" she asked, heart thudding. "Remy Delacroix," came the reply. His tone was clipped, polite in a controlled, distant sort of way. "I'm Theo's father." Sasha's mind raced. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it wasn't this. A billionaire rumored to wield enormous influence in the business sector, standing outside her minuscule apartment. His expensive coat was still damp from the rain. Something about him radiated both power and restraint, like he was a man who rarely wasted words or actions. "I wanted to thank you," Remy continued, as though reading her thoughts, "for helping Theo last night." Sasha noted the slightest shift in his expression, a fleeting vulnerability. She opened the door another inch but blocked the threshold with her body. "Thank me?" she echoed. "That's not necessary." He was cold and alone. "I just did what anyone would do." Ushtatum, a brief pause followed, charged with the tension of unspoken truths. "Not everyone would," Remy said quietly, glancing at the worn carpet in the hallway. "I've seen plenty of people look away." His gaze returned to her, leveled and intense. "So yes, I want to thank you." Sasha gripped the edge of the door. She could almost feel the electricity of his presence. "All right," she said softly. "Thanks accepted. But how did you find out where I live?" "Let's just say I have resources," he replied. The words lingered uncomfortably, reminding her of the gulf between them. He was a billionaire capable of accessing information with ease, while she struggled to pay rent on a tiny apartment. "I'd like to offer you something," Remy continued. "I'm sure the diner doesn't pay much. I can make sure you never worry about money again." Her grip on the door tightened as indignation flared. "You think I helped your son because I wanted a payday?" She snapped, her voice slightly raised despite the risk of waking her neighbors. "I'm not for sale." Remy blinked, the faintest frown forming. "No, I'm not suggesting that, but I do believe in debts. In my world, every kindness has a cost, and I prefer to pay my debts promptly." He reached into his coat and extracted a slim envelope, placing it on the narrow shelf beside her door. "This is an offer. Consider it carefully." She stared at the envelope, suspicion warring with curiosity. Pride bristled in her chest, but a flicker of possibility surfaced too. What would it mean to have financial stability for the first time in her life? Before she could frame a response, Remy gave her a slight nod. "Thank you again for what you did," he repeated, then turned and strode down the hallway. Sleep eluded Sasha that night. The envelope sat on her small kitchen table like a forbidden secret, By morning, she caved to temptation and opened it. Expecting a check, she was startled instead by an official-looking document emblazoned with a corporate emblem, Delacroix Innovations. The text outlined a job offer, one so generous it made her eyes widen. There was a six-figure salary, health benefits, even a line about potential bonuses. She sat there groggy and uncomprehending, scanning the pages over and over as her pulse throbbed in her ears. Could this be some sort of elaborate trick? She had only just met Theo, and Remy himself had barely exchanged a handful of words with her. Yet the language in the offer was formal, detailing that she'd be working with Remy directly in a specialized role that combined public relations and personal assistance, particularly as it related to philanthropic events for disabled children. The letter practically glowed with possibilities, and it contained the heavy weight of a life-altering chance. She nearly cried, feeling an overwhelming mixture of gratitude, confusion, and skepticism. Was she being toyed with? Or perhaps set up to fail in a world she knew nothing about? The more she considered it, the more her heart pounded with a wild mix of excitement and fear. Eventually, she crammed the papers back into the envelope, showered, and headed to the diner, uncertain whether she'd respond or simply rip the documents to shreds. At the diner, her coworker Pam noticed her jittery hands and faraway look. "You all right, hon?" Pam asked, peering at Sasha over the counter. "You look like you're in the middle of a life crisis." Pam was older, with silver-streaked hair and a commanding presence that kept rowdy customers in check. Sasha let out a trembling exhale. "I might be," she admitted, then showed Pam the job offer. Pam's eyes bugged out. "This is real?" Pam whispered, her voice tense with awe. Sasha nodded, explaining the events of the night before, about Theo, and then Remy's unexpected appearance. Pam was silent for a moment before she whistled under her breath. "Sasha, this is... wow. You help a random kid and end up with a six-figure deal? It sounds like a fairy tale, but be careful. There's a saying that what seems too good to be true usually is." Her words echoed Sasha's own doubts. All day between orders and cleaning, Sasha felt the envelope burning a hole in her bag. At closing time, she made an impulsive decision. If this was a hoax or some twisted game, she needed to face it head-on. She left the diner and took a bus to the address listed on the letterhead, the towering Delacroix Innovations building in the city's posh financial district. The difference between the diner's gritty atmosphere and Delacroix Innovations' gleaming lobby could not have been more jarring. Polished marble floors reflected overhead chandeliers. People in tailored suits strode with purpose, rarely breaking stride. Sasha, dressed in her diner uniform, drew more than a few raised eyebrows from receptionists and security guards. Swallowing her insecurities, she approached the front desk. "I'm here to see Remy Delacroix," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist, a poised woman with perfect lipstick, gave Sasha a quick once-over before replying. "Do you have an appointment?" Sasha waved the envelope. "He offered me this job." To her surprise, the receptionist blinked, typed a quick message, and then frowned at her screen. A moment later, the phone at her desk rang. The receptionist answered, listened, and then regarded Sasha with newfound caution. "Someone will be here shortly to escort you," she said, her tone guarded. Sasha waited in the grand lobby, trying not to gawk at the sumptuous surroundings or the huge glass windows overlooking the skyline. She felt like an alien in a world of wealth. Shortly thereafter, Naomi Shepard emerged from an elevator bank, her stride rapid. She reached Sasha with a perfunctory smile. "Right this way," she said, guiding her through a corridor adorned with sleek artwork and muted gray walls. A hush enveloped them, punctuated by the faint hum of modern climate control systems. Naomi led her into a large corner office with sweeping views of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across two walls, capturing the sunlight that had finally emerged after the previous night's storm. Behind an imposing mahogany desk sat Remy Delacroix. Remy stood as they entered, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit. The contrast between Sasha's rumpled diner uniform and his polished attire was impossible to ignore. Yet when he spoke, his tone was measured. "Ms. Greenwood," he said, inclining his head, "I see you decided to pay us a visit." Sasha advanced into the office, acutely aware of the plush carpet under her worn shoes. I needed to see if this was real," she managed, holding up the envelope. "And if it is real, why?" Remy offered a faint smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Direct, I respect that. He gestured toward a chair across from his desk, then sat down again. Naomi remained by the door, tablet in hand, looking poised for any command. The job offer is absolutely real. You might think it's excessive, but I believe in rewarding genuine kindness. Theo's well-being matters more to me than any business deal. The fact that you cared for him without knowing who he was, or who I am, mattered. Sasha lowered herself onto the leather chair. She had never met someone who spoke with such composed assurance. So, you're giving me a role worth 6 figures? That's impossible to wrap my head around. Remy spread his palms. I hire people who excel at what they do. You're exceptional at connecting with others, at empathizing. It's a rare skill. My corporate circles are filled with individuals who can manipulate, negotiate, or sell. But genuine empathy? That's scarce. He paused. I want to channel that quality of yours into my company's philanthropic and community outreach programs. And yes, you'll be compensated well, because that's how much I value the impact you can have. Huh. She couldn't help thinking about all the ways her life might transform if she accepted. Gone would be the days of worrying about eviction notices taped to her door. She could pay for a reliable car, finally access decent health care, even take a few night classes if she wanted. But something nagged at her. I appreciate the opportunity, she said carefully, but I can't help feeling like there's more to this. Remy glanced at Naomi, then back at Sasha. Perhaps there is, he conceded. I won't pretend I'm a simple man. I have conditions and I have expectations. For starters, I need someone loyal. If you accept this role, you'll see and hear things not meant for the press or the public. Confidentiality is paramount. I also need your willingness to engage directly with organizations that serve disabled youth. Theo's condition is personal to me, and I want to expand our philanthropic footprint. Sasha swallowed, heart thudding. And what if I fail? His gaze bore into hers with almost disconcerting intensity. Failure isn't an option here, Ms. Greenwood, he replied. But if you're worried about skill gaps or training, I'll ensure you get the support you need. Her stomach knotted with conflicting emotions. Could she handle such a leap from the diner to a corporate behemoth? And could she navigate the complexities of working for someone who dealt in power like currency? She took a quiet breath. I'll need time to think. Remy nodded. Take the rest of the day. Bring me your decision tomorrow morning. If you choose not to accept, consider the offer void. He regarded her steadily. But I sincerely hope you do accept. I think we could accomplish a lot together. Sasha rose from the chair, clinging to the envelope. Her voice felt shaky when she managed a brief thank you. She left, escorted by Naomi's unyielding presence. As she stepped into the elevator, descending floor after floor, her heart pounded with each ding. By the time she reached the lobby, she wasn't sure if her knees would hold her weight. A swirl of possibilities crowded her mind. Late that evening, her decision finally crystallized. With a trembling hand, she called Remy's number, provided in the job offer's contact information, and left a message. She accepted. The next morning, she formally quit her job at the diner, surprising Pam and the owner, who wished her well with cautious optimism. And by the end of the week, Sasha Greenwood became a new recruit at Delacroix Innovations. Her first day felt like stepping onto a different planet. Gone were the greasy counters and flickering lights of the diner. In their place stood a towering skyscraper with rows of desks manned by impeccably dressed professionals. Sasha had to adjust quickly to a swirl of meetings and presentations. To business jargon and corporate etiquette she had never needed to master before. She strove to absorb every detail, from the procedures for drafting outreach memos to the protocols surrounding private board sessions. Naomi Shepard hovered nearby, assessing her performance, pointing out pitfalls and ensuring that Sasha didn't stray off course. Even so, Sasha's empathy shone through. She could calmly diffuse tensions in a tense conference call, or strike up warm conversations with staff members who were otherwise wary of newcomers. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, she reminded herself why she was there, to help champion philanthropic endeavors for disabled youth, children like Theo. Though her contact with Theo himself was, at first, sporadic, she saw him during corporate events and sometimes in the building's private lounge, where he'd be waiting for his father after medical appointments. Each time, Theo offered a shy smile that lit up his eyes. He still remembered that fateful night in the diner. "Thanks for that grilled cheese," he'd say with a playful grin, and Sasha would chuckle, telling him that next time she'd whip up something even better. Remy observed these interactions from the periphery, guarded yet undeniably intrigued. Meanwhile, Sasha threw herself into work. She spearheaded a partnership between Delacroix Innovations and a local rehabilitation center, negotiating a funding agreement that allowed children in wheelchairs to access state-of-the-art therapy equipment. She also led a volunteer initiative for employees to mentor underprivileged teens. Step by step, she found her footing, forging relationships and building respect from peers who initially doubted her credentials. Yet the corporate landscape was not without its dangers. Whispers circulated that some executives disliked how close Sasha was becoming to Remy, suspecting favoritism or hidden agendas. The more she excelled, the more she sensed subtle hostility. It manifested in small ways, missing invitations to certain meetings or icy stares in the hallway. She did her best to ignore it, reminding herself that negativity was a universal phenomenon in any workplace. Things came to a head when confidential financial data leaked to the press, jeopardizing a major deal Delacroix Innovations was about to close. The details pointed to someone high up in the company. Whispers started circulating that Sasha might be involved. She was new after all, and had come from out of nowhere. Soon, she found herself the focal point of suspicious glances. Even Naomi seemed to watch her with renewed vigilance. One afternoon, Sasha was summoned to Remy's office with an urgency that made her palms sweat. She stepped inside, finding him alone, standing by the massive window overlooking the city. The sky was overcast and the distant drone of traffic created a tense atmosphere. On his desk lay a stack of papers. He turned to face her, and for the first time since they'd met, Sasha saw genuine turmoil in his eyes. "Someone leaked the Delacroix financial plans," he said, voice low with controlled anger. "Our stock has already taken a hit. The board is demanding an internal investigation." He exhaled sharply. "And it's pointing in your direction, Sasha." Her chest constricted. Remy, you know me better than that. I do know you, but many on the board don't," he replied, scanning her face. "Tell me there's no chance you're involved." She squared her shoulders, refusing to tremble despite her fear. "I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this." Slowly, he nodded. "All right, then let's figure out who did. Because if we don't, the board will insist on terminating you to appease shareholders." Sasha felt the sting of anger and injustice. She had clawed her way to this position, poured her heart into the job, and now a single rumor could cost her everything. Yet surprisingly, Remy's steady gaze carried reassurance. "We'll uncover the truth," he said. "Trust me." In that moment, she realized something. She did trust him, at least more than she would have ever expected to trust a billionaire with influence carved from a lifetime of merciless deals. And so, united by a shared determination, they set out to unmask the real culprit. A hush settled over the boardroom as Remy gave Sasha a quick nod, silently urging her to continue. Meeting those skeptical gazes, she recalled her days at the diner, where a small act of kindness could transform someone's entire outlook. Stepping forward, she insisted that trust was built through humility, not just polished statements. With every word, Sasha felt a surge of pride. She was no longer just the waitress from a rundown neighborhood. She was a vital force for positive change. Her proposal was met with cautious acceptance at first, then growing support as the team grasped the potential impact. Even the board members who once eyed her with suspicion began to reconsider. By the end of the meeting, Remy spoke up, commending Sasha's bravery. That quiet moment, where shared conviction overcame doubt, showed everyone present that compassion, grounded in truth, could redefine the very core of Delacroix Innovations.